specifically then, do you see this case remaining in MAPA level 2?
Are we quite happy to keep it at 2 rather than 3? I just think he poses such a risk. I just wonder whether, in my view, he does anyway.
I think level 3, yeah.
Okay,
The level decided by the team will affect the actions they'll take to watch him. There's 50,000 offenders monitored on one of 3 levels under MAPA across England and Wales. Level 1 offenders are managed by just one agency. They fall into 2 categories: violent offenders who must check in with their probation officer, or sex offenders who are visited by the police. Level 2 are usually watched by both police and probation. Level 3 are known as the critical few. These are considered such high risk, some even require around-the-clock surveillance. But only level 2 and 3 offenders are discussed at MAPA meetings. Sonic should have gone through this process, but he was wrongly classed at level 1 and received the lowest level of supervision.
The other thing is, within the prison, there's no suggestion here that he's been seen by anybody from the InReach
The
team.
MAPA team includes an appointed layperson to raise their concerns. In the case of this violent offender, I've been invited to ask any questions.
If you could just summarise the action you're going to take to try and protect the public from what sounds like a very, very dangerous individual.
I would want, first of all, the police officer to meet him when he comes out with probation, to actually let him know that we're very concerned about him. We're going to be keeping a close eye on him. I would want to make sure whichever area he goes to that the neighbourhood police team knows about him, so they have a picture of him, they know what he looks like, they know the risk he presents.
Surely individuals like this should be sentenced for a very long time in prison. That would be the general public's view. And if MAPA agencies were advocating that that's what should be done, is that not what MAPA agencies do?
With regards to this offence, the charge isn't an attempted rape, it's sexual touching. He's no previous convictions. He wouldn't have been assessed as dangerous at that stage because of the relevant previous factors, and that's what MAPA essentially is for. We do know he's dangerous, and it's about managing him then in the community. This is what we work with.
We operate within the law, and the law determines that this man will be released from prison on a given date, subject to licence, which again is for a determinate period. So we have to work with reality, and that's the reality of sentencing.
The number of offenders on the MAPA scheme keeps rising, up 11,000 in just 4 years. The probation service also has record numbers of offenders to manage on licence because of the pressure on prison places. Harry Fletcher is the chair of NAPO, the Probation Officers Union.
MAPA works in theory, quite clearly, and it works for the 1,000 or so people who pose the highest risk. It also works effectively as it can do for the middle range of people, but the remainder, 39,000 low risk, are not supervised in the same intensive way because there aren't any resources to do it. And frankly, there aren't enough police officers or probation officers to cover the cases that we've got.
The majority of this low-risk group are registered sex offenders. The police are on the front line of their supervision.
Been his offender manager for quite a while now, so I have had...
There's over 31,000 sex offenders across England and Wales. Each force has a dedicated public protection team. Taryn Baddeley and Roger Savage are part of the unit that monitors sex offenders in West Mercia.
Main concerns about those that you manage in the community, what are they?
Probably my main concern is that often I can only act upon what they actually tell me. It pays never to forget that a great deal of our offenders are extremely intelligent, and by the nature of their offending, often very devious people by nature. And I have to be aware that they can be attempting to fool me on occasions.
I suppose one of the things that the general public are interested in is those that you are managing in the community, that you're keeping an eye on, should they be in the community?
I think we have a lot of very dangerous offenders who probably shouldn't be in the community, but we do our very best to manage their risk as effectively as we can. We can't manage them 24 hours a day, and if they can find a way to get through the system, they will and do on occasion.
Last year there were no serious further offences recorded in West Mercia. Its Chief Constable Paul West is the ACPO lead on the management of violent and sexual offenders.
How do you think police prevent highly dangerous offenders committing serious further offences?
I think it's very difficult to prevent anybody who's intent on doing that, without literally being there 24 hours a day. But I think I can have a good degree of confidence that were the management arrangements not in place, because often it will lead to people being breached and sent back to prison, then the public wouldn't be protected in the way that they are, and you can anticipate that number would be significantly higher.
Roger and Taryn are on their way to visit a paedophile who has previously been sentenced to 20 years in prison for abusing young children.
Today we're going to do one of our visits to an offender we're monitoring at a very high risk level. His sentence related to serious sexual abuse on boys. I mean, he has been through the full MAPA system. When he was released from custody, he was at a level 3, and then obviously as his circumstances change, and we have then dropped the levels, and now he's level 1 now.
It took 18 months for MAPA to reduce the level of management after the offender completed a treatment programme, but this doesn't mean he is less risk.
Why have you stopped the vehicle?
Obviously we can't film any farther at this point for concern that we might identify where the person we're seeing today is living.
Well, they've just kicked me out of the vehicle and they won't let me go to see where the offender lives, but that's the law. Sex offenders' identities and whereabouts are protected from the general public unless there are exceptional circumstances. To film with this offender, we have to meet him in a police house and disguise his voice.
How are you today?
Fine, thanks. Yeah.
Anything happened since I last saw you?
I was on a train coming back from Birmingham, and a load of Boy Scouts were getting into the carriage where I was.
Yeah.
So I got up, moved to the next carriage. That's keeping myself safe.
Do you think you'd still get a sexual thought, say on public transport, for example, and there was a child near to you? Would you have a sexual thought about that child?
Not now. I've learned to control my sexual urges.
Yeah.
I don't look at children as like objects for sex anymore. They're innocent people as far as I'm concerned now.
Yeah.
And to be left alone to get on with their lives. Yeah.
According to MAPA guidelines, a very high-risk offender like this one would be seen a minimum of once a month, a low-risk offender just once a year. Local neighbourhood policing teams also act as additional eyes and ears. But is this arbitrary way of picking up information enough to prevent an offender from striking again?
I think what we have now is much better than there being no arrangements, which was the situation before. It was cross your fingers and hope, once they've been released, that things don't go wrong. Look, it can never be perfect, but I think that those reoffending rates at the higher levels of supervision do indicate a certain amount of success.
To judge whether MAPA is actually working, each year the government publishes the numbers of serious crimes committed by offenders. These are around 70, including rape, murder and serious sexual assault every year. But these figures only relate to level 2 and 3. They've never included level 1 offenders, who are the least monitored.